Evening, one and all. Welcome to the Chris Salcedo Show Worldwide here on the Vida television network. Very short first segment, so we got to get right to it. Here's how you get in touch with the show. Go to chrissalcedo.com, email or voicemail there, or instantaneous feedback at Chris Salcedo TX. The sexual misconduct allegations have been going crazy, ladies and gentlemen. The dam has broken with that Weinstein article that was published by Ronan Farrow, and the dams have burst. Now, I want to run by a partial list of those names we know so far have been either accused or admitted to wrongdoing in sexual harassment. We'll start with the latest. His name is Charlie Rose. Now, he is a left-wing, biased, former anchor and reporter with CBS News and with PBS. He's been fired because of these allegations, so troubling. I mean, they were really bad, folks, walking around nude in front of people he was making advances on and lewd phone calls as well. He was ousted from CBS. Again, left-wing biased hack. That is Glenn Thrush. He works for now for the New York Times, suspended amid allegations of improper sexual conduct toward young female reporters. We're sticking with the media right now. That there is Mark Halperin. Mark Halperin, one of these guys, again, left-wing, biased, alleged reporter, caught, at least alleged to have made inappropriate sexual advances toward women, utilizing his position at ABC News. So that's just the media, okay? And there are plenty more. We'll get to Hollywood here in a minute, but now let's start on the politicians. That's former President William Jefferson Clinton. Now, we all know about Juanita Broderick, Monica Lewinsky, Jennifer Flowers, Paula Jones. By the way, it bears pointing out, you guys are going to hear a lot of left-wingers say, oh, but he was impeached over his sexual misconduct. No, he was not. Bill Clinton was impeached because he lied under oath. He has not stood a day for the sexual attacks, in particular the rapes that he is alleged to have done. And I think the statute of limitations have run out on those, so he'll never stand a day in trial because of those. But according to the Daily UK Mail and exclusive reporting this week, Bill Clinton there has 4 new accusers, according to Ed Klein. So stay tuned for that. That's Ted Kennedy. Ted Kennedy, of course, we all know what happened with him and Chappaquiddick and the dead intern inside of Capitol Hill. But also he had a nasty reputation throughout the years of inappropriate sexual behavior toward waitresses, toward pages, toward interns. Of course, very close personal friends before his passing with resident Barack Obama. JFK, who can forget the steady cavalcade of tarts in and out of the White House. Of course, the most famous, an actress by the name of Marilyn Monroe, rumored to have been a liaison with the former Democrat president. John Conyers, the longest-serving congressman in the current Congress. Mr. Conyers has admitted that he used a congressional slush fund to pay off his accusers. By the way, folks, that fund, while I'm thinking about this, has now paid out, we're told, over 17 million taxpayers' dollars to accusers of individuals up on Capitol Hill who were said to have undertaken sexual harassment or sexual misconduct. Mr. Conyers is the first one to admit he has partaken in that fund. The rest of the names, we don't know. I want to reiterate right now, the Chris Salcedo Show Worldwide is calling on Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell, Senate Minority Leader Chuck Toomer, the Minority Leader in the House of Representatives Nancy Pelosi, and the Speaker of the House Paul Ryan to release every name of those accused paid out from that slush fund, $17 million, past or present serving. And they got to do it now. We're also further calling on all of those individuals who are currently serving in Congress that they be given Mitch McConnell's Roy Moore standard, which is, remember that the standard from Roy Moore is, if Roy Moore wins his election in Alabama, he is to be immediately expelled from the Senate. We call on that treatment for everyone accused of sexual harassment on Capitol Hill whose accusers have received payouts to the tune of $17 million from this fund. That guy is one of them. Again, a Democrat congressman. Al Franken, a Democrat senator. This senator has admitted to wrongdoing as he was alleged to have by Miss Tweeden, Leanne Tweeden, and a news anchor right now, and yes, she did pose for Playboy magazine, that Mr. Franken, she alleges, shoved his tongue down her throat in an unwanted kiss. Many liberals folks have taken to social media trying to shame Miss Tweeden, victim shame Miss Tweeden, even though that guy has admitted to wrongdoing with Miss Tweeden. He has two other accusers, one Melanie Morgan, from a talk show host from San Francisco, and another accuser who has just come out. By the way, that third accuser has been met with radio silence from most of the press and from his Democrat colleagues on Capitol Hill and his Republican colleagues on Capitol Hill. Now let's get into Hollywood. That's Harvey Weinstein. Here's the guy that basically broke the dam open for everybody. Ronan Farrow was the man who broke the story on Harvey Weinstein. He had to publish. Now, he was an employee of NBC News, folks, but he had to publish his story in the New Yorker magazine. Why is that? We have come to find out that NBC News did their very best to protect Harvey Weinstein. Why? Because Harvey Weinstein is a wealthy man and a Democrat donor. And that's why NBC News killed that story. Ronan Farrow has more stories coming out, and guess who's going to be publishing them? The New Yorker. It won't be NBC, air quotes, news, because they protect Democrats accused of sexual impropriety over at NBC News. They were also the ones who sided with Al Franken even after he admitted guilt, trying to defend him. It's sick over at NBC News. Kevin Spacey, upon being called out for impropriety, declared he was gay. As a matter of fact, I think the impropriety was done with a minor who Kevin Spacey made advances at, and then he claimed he was gay. Kevin Spacey's series on Netflix has been canceled, and he's been blackballed from many other projects. Sylvester Stallone has fielded accusations, ladies and gentlemen, of improper behavior. Absolutely amazing. Now, I'm not even sure what his politics are, Sly Stallone. I think he might even be a Republican. But Sly Stallone vehemently denies those accusations. Then there's Roy Moore. Roy Moore has been accused of some pretty awful things, and the interview that he gave to Sean Hannity gave conservatives like me a lot of pause. There's a lot of smoke there. He has, seven, 8, 9 accusers at this point? Now, he is flatly denied, all allegations against him, unlike Al Franken and unlike Charlie Rose, who have admitted to their wrongdoing. But Roy Moore has said that he is challenging the one of the most damning accusers, which is the one who possesses the yearbook. It is instructive, ladies and gentlemen, to let you know that Gloria Allred, who represents the fifth accuser of Roy Moore, is refusing to turn over that yearbook to be forensically analyzed to see if the signature that is contained therein is a forgery. And she would not, when asked by CNN, say that she could verify that it was not a forgery. Look, Roy Moore did not accord himself well in an interview with Sean Hannity. And again, I have to say, A lot of red flags were raised with me. But still, at this point, these are just accusations. But many on Capitol Hill, never Trumpers, and those who fear the outside influence on Capitol Hill, meaning we the people, they have already declared that if Roy Moore wins his election, and internal polling is showing in Alabama that he is ahead, but external polling is showing that he's behind. If he wins, they are pledging to expel Roy Moore out of the U.S. Senate. If that is the case, the Chris Salcedo Show Worldwide expects that to be the treatment on allegations alone of every single member who is accused of wrongdoing and have had payouts from that to the tune of $17 million from that slush fund we mentioned earlier. The press is very desirous to say this man is also a sexual predator. Let me be plain, ladies and gentlemen. All of those who have accused Donald Trump, 12 of them, I believe, most of them have been recanted or disproven, or at this point, Donald Trump has said they're lying and they haven't had their day in court. We'll see what happens in the days to come. All right, coming up next, we will deal with, a topic that we haven't touched much on, self-defense, the Second Amendment, and guns. Chris Salcedo Show Worldwide here on the Vida Television Network. Hey, folks, welcome back. The Chris Salcedo Show Worldwide here on the Vida Television Network. Glad you stayed around for the second half of the show. We'll get to the guest that we talked to earlier today on the radio, but I wanted to give you a little context as to why I brought this individual on to talk about the issue that we're going to talk about. The Washington Post had a rather interesting article. It's on the Chris Salcedo Show Facebook page if you want to check it out. It's about a church in Tampa, Florida. In the wake of the shooting in Sutherland Springs, Texas, the pastor there decided he would advertise. There's a sign out in front that says, in essence, our patrons are armed to the teeth, or our parishioners are armed to the teeth. Test it at your own peril. Now, whereas I'm more sympathetic to that type of sign than I am to the sign that says you can't conceal carry on this premises, whether it be a church or a business. In the state of Texas, they call them 30-06, 30-07 signs. And basically they say, if you're concealed carry or open carry, you can't come into this business. Might I suggest that both approaches are wrong? Advertising that your people are armed, you're basically sending out an invitation to crazy people to test you. And I don't think that's really the right way to go. It's like that woman who's driving around in Texas with a sign that says blank Trump and blank all of you who voted for Trump. She's just asking for trouble. And I don't think that makes good practical common sense. Now, on the other hand, there's what we call in Texas 30-06, 30-07 signs, or in your state, it might be a sign that says, hey, you can't conceal carry or you can't open carry on the premises, whether it be a church or a business. That, too, sends the wrong message. That basically says, hey, look, all the law-abiding folks here on our premises, they are not carrying, they can't defend themselves, so come in and shoot us up consequence-free. I think both the signs send the wrong message. So you might be asking yourself, well, what is our course then? Well, the course is to make a rather big deal of saying we are not going to prohibit concealed carry, licensed concealed carry folks from bringing weapons onto our premises, period. One of my favorite yard signs read like this: this house is protected by Smith & Wesson 4 days out of the week. You decide which 4. I think that would be a sufficient deterrent for individuals who are looking to make easy prey of those who are disarmed. Because this is what I think about those so-called gun-free zones, folks. They're killing zones because the crazy people know they will be able to ply their despicable trade unopposed. And I think that's the wrong way to go. But I also think asking for trouble is also the wrong way to go. Keep in mind that the individual who shot up the theater in Aurora, Colorado, went way out of his way to find a theater that prohibited law-abiding citizens from carrying weapons into that theater. Like I said, I don't want to make it easier for the crazy people. Okay, this was the topic of conversation. We talked to a preacher who was a lifelong member of the National Rifle Association about these types of circumstances, also had a Thanksgiving message. Have a listen to the Chris Salcedo Show earlier today. Welcome back, everybody. Got Chris Salcedo sitting in for Lance. Want to get to our guest, the Reverend Dr. Rob Schenck. I hope I'm pronouncing that name correctly. It's the first time I've had him on. He's an ordained evangelical minister and president of the Dietrich Bonhoeffer Institute, located in Washington, D.C., a leading leader among American evangelicals. The doctor here has served a 2-term as chairman of the Evangelical Church Alliance, America's oldest association of independent evangelical clergy. Doctor and Reverend, am I pronouncing your last name correctly first?
You sure are. If it were 100 years ago, it would be Schenck, but I wouldn't do that to you.
Very nice. Mr. Schenck, thank you so much for being here on the Chris Salcedo Show. Look, the reason I wanted to get you on is because your perspective isn't being echoed out there among the mainstream, what I call the basket of bias press. And here we are in Texas, still smarting from the most horrific shooting, I think, since Sandy Hook, where a bunch of churchgoers were mercilessly slaughtered by a crazy man with a gun and stopped by a good guy with a gun, an AR-15. Give us your, from 30,000 feet, just give us your perspective on what has transpired so far.
Well, yeah, it's hard to find words to describe what happened in Sutherland Springs, and our hearts, our prayers, our thoughts, our concern must remain with those good people who suffered so much trauma. And I've been telling people, while I believe very strongly in prayer and that it's effective, I'm a Christian, I'm a minister, I see the positive impact of prayer on people's lives. I believe God answers prayer. But we always have to match our faith with our action. And I've been saying to people, there's something else you can do. You can go to the Facebook page at Sutherland Springs, or First Baptist at Sutherland Springs, and find them there. Make a donation to help those people. They have a crushing burden in the wake of this terrible tragedy. But I'll tell you my perspective on it. You mentioned this courageous, heroic neighbor who responded and is himself traumatized by the experience and needs our support. And yet the sad side of that is that it appears this perpetrator was done with his despicable and dastardly act by the time he was encountered by that neighbor. We don't know what he planned to do next, but we do know he had already killed 26 people and injured more than 20. So the deed was done, and that tells us something. That tells us we must find a way to interrupt the plans of sociopaths and psychopaths to get the weapons they want to carry out their mass murderous fantasies. We're able to take the keys away from people with an alcohol problem who shouldn't be driving. We are clever enough to take high-powered, high-capacity battlefield-grade weapons away from mass-murdering sociopaths. We're clever enough to do that, and we must meet that challenge.
Now, what about, I don't know if you were a big fan of television back in the 80s, Reverend, but there was a character that was played by Robert Blake. He was a Catholic priest. And I'll never forget this because it was part of a promo that was on, and my young little mind was digesting all of this. he had a lament to he had a whole bunch of kids gathered around him, and he said, look, God can't be there for you all the time, so you carry a baseball bat, is what he said. That was his way of saying, look, God is all knowing, all merciful, but you know what? He also helps those who help themselves. What about those who believe it is time that force be met with force, like that individual did, that good neighbor in the shooting here in Texas? What about arming individuals to make sure that our places of worship are protected?
Well, I do remember that, by the way. I do remember that very show. That was a great show.
It was.
And, if you're a Christian, as I am, then you believe that Jesus is God in the flesh. So let's go to God and what he actually has to say about this. And he told us you must be as wise as serpents and harmless as doves. Now, what is a dove? A dove is a symbol of peace.
Sure.
And not harm. And this is a very serious question for pastors, for church leaders, and for anyone who attends a house of worship. Because if you were trained, as I was, with a professional firearms trainer, and I was, and by the way, I'm a life member of the NRA, so I'm not anti-gun, but I'm going to say this, word of caution, and we need wisdom here, because whenever you put a weapon on your body, you must be prepared to kill, and kill in an instant, or the weapon will be taken from you and used to kill you and go on to kill others. So you actually contribute to the problem. You don't ameliorate it. You don't help it if you're not ready to kill. That means when you go to the house of God armed, you are prepared to kill, including in the sanctuary, and likely someone you know, or somebody who's known to the community, because that's the way it usually works. It's generally not a stranger, especially in a church. It's
in Sutherland Springs, it was a stranger, somebody from an adjacent town who happened to have a mother-in-law who went there. But the point is taken, and isn't the lament is if you want to defend your church, you want to defend your family, then if you're going to make the decision to pick up that weapon, by God, get some training.
Well, of course, and this is where I've said to pastors, and many of them lately, as I've talked with church leaders across the country in the wake of this, first of all, realize that a church is a family. Families have dysfunctional members. Don't put out the all call, everybody come armed. You're going to ask dysfunctional people to come to the church armed and ready to kill.
Sure.
If they are amateurs, bullets are going to be flying in the wrong directions. Often, it could be at the wrong time because they're not trained to discern what is really a mortal threat and what is not. So we must be extremely careful here. And if we are pro-life, and most Christians are, we respect the sanctity of human life. That means we must look at non-lethal forms of protection, and they are many. There are many ways of protecting a congregation without introducing deadly firepower into the church building.
Our guest right now is a Reverend and Dr. Rob Schenck. He is an ordained evangelical minister and president of the Dietrich Bonhoeffer Institute, located in Washington, D.C. The last theological question that I have for you is, we have heard many on the political left who are my political opposition. They have made the case that God, and they do this in a mocking way because many of them are not God-fearing people. They do this in a way by saying Christ and God were peaceful people, and the idea of meeting force with force is counter to Jesus' teaching, as if they knew. Does God require his people to be defenseless?
Certainly not defenseless. No, I do again go to the model of Jesus. If we look at his life, and I like to call it the Christ hermeneutic, since we're talking theology. Hermeneutic means your interpretive device. How do you look at the Bible, the story of the Bible? How do you look at God? Well, I look at God through the person of Jesus Christ, both his teaching and his way of life. He never used lethal defense, not once. His disciples did not. though they were armed.
Mm-hmm.
And in one encounter, they showed off their swords to Jesus. They had two of them. He said, that's enough. So, you could argue in a cheeky way that he was for gun regulation because he said two is enough. Don't even get any more than that. So,
I see.
But then, okay, that's pushing it a little bit too far. But I will say that there are times when we are literally called to surrender our lives, that it's not God's will for me to survive every violent encounter. That's a difficult question to ask. It's a very serious and deep question, but we must all ask all of these questions. Where do we draw the lines? There are lines to be drawn. We must draw them, and these are the times when we must look at it. But let me just say this one final word. There are 350,000 churches in America. On one Sunday, one of them experienced the unspeakable, but 349,999 others were places of prayer, peace, safety, and security. Let's not distort that and get carried away, because there's a temptation to give into fear, and fear should never control the lives of Christians.
Last thing, Reverend, we're coming up on the Thanksgiving holiday here in the United States, and very few stop to think of who we're giving thanks to as we sit down at table and we gather around family. Any words for the Lance Roberts / Chris Salcedo Show audience here as we head into the Thanksgiving holiday?
Well, I'm going to say that Thanksgiving is the only distinctly religious holiday recognized by a long history officially in the United States, and the thanks began as thanks to Almighty God. It continues in that vein. Look at the history. It's a rich history. It's an inspiring history. Just Google it, and you'll find exactly where we need to put our thanks to Almighty God for all the good things that he's given to us in spite of the challenges around us.
The Good Reverend and Dr. Rob Shank, ordained evangelical minister and president of the Dietrich Bonhoeffer Institute, located in our nation's capital in Washington, D.C. Happy Thanksgiving to you, sir. Thanks for spending some time with us here. And that is going to do it for the Chris Salcedo Show Worldwide here on the Vida Television Network for this evening. A couple of programming notes I want you guys to be aware of. On Friday, we will have a best of show on Black Friday. We figure you guys are going to be out doing a lot of late night shopping, okay? But we will have an original show here on Thursday evening, so you and the family, as you're reclining back in that tryptophan-induced coma, you guys can have some original programming centered around the holiday, the very American holiday of Thanksgiving. And I'll give you a little preview of what it's about. What are we thanking for? And who are we thanking? What is Thanksgiving all about? This will give me an opportunity to not only to focus on that, but also to pay homage to a personal hero of mine, a political hero of mine, and a professional hero of mine, all rolled up into one. So I hope you guys can make it for the Chris Salcedo Show Worldwide on Thanksgiving night. ChrisSalcedo.com, ChrisSalcedo.com. If you want to leave a voicemail or an email, you can do so there, or instantaneous feedback on Twitter at Chris Salcedo TX. Hope to see you tomorrow night. Happy Thanksgiving, one and all. The Chris Salcedo Show Worldwide here on the Vida Television Network.